Good evening. I'm Cheryl Ziegler, Director of the ULCC Library and Archives. On behalf of our hosts, the ULCC Library Committee, Literary Subcommittee, Archives Subcommittee, and the Caxton Club, welcome to tonight's program with Dr. Marcia Walker-McWilliams on the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, 15 years of documenting and sharing Black Chicago's history. I would like to extend a special welcome to our Caxton Club friends who are attending this program. If you're not a Union League Club member, I hope you will consider membership in our club community, one that values civic, cultural, and social engagement. For more information, visit www.ulcc.org or contact membership@ulcc.org. A huge thank you to Caxton Club President Jackie Bosler for collaborating with us on our virtual programming. By working together, we can extend our reach and bring you more and varied programming. We truly are better together. I would also like to announce that our ULCC Outstanding Book on the History of Chicago will be awarded in a virtual ceremony on Thursday, March 11th at 6:00 p.m. This program will be free and open to the public, and we hope you will join us to celebrate Chicago's outstanding book scholarship. Marcia will be happy to answer questions, so please put them in the Q&A anytime during the program, and they will be addressed after her presentation. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. Dr. Marcia Walker-McWilliams is the Executive Director of the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, or BMRC. As the BMRC Executive Director, Marcia provides strategic leadership for the consortium's activities and works with BMRC member institutions and the public to facilitate the discovery, preservation, and use of Black historical collections in Chicago. She received a PhD in American history from the University of Chicago and an undergraduate degree in social policy and African American studies from Northwestern University. As a graduate student, Marcia worked with the Mapping the Stacks project and the Harsh Archival Processing Project to process African American archival collections. Marcia is the author of Reverend Addie Wyatt, Faith and the Fight for Labor, Gender, and Racial Equality, and co-author of two upcoming projects, The Civil Rights Movement Reader with Tracy Parker, and Revisiting the Black Metropolis, New Histories of Black Chicago, with Simon Balto and Eric Gelman. Prior to the BMRC, Marcia taught courses in American history and African American studies at Lone Star College, Prairie View A&M University, the University of Houston, and Rice University, where she also served as an associate director in the Center for Civic Leadership. Marcia serves on the board of the Chicago Women's History Center, the Chicago State University Library and Information Science Advisory Board, and the Dominican University School of Information Studies Advisory Board. Thank you so much for being here, Marcia. I'm going to now turn it over to you with a reminder to the audience. Please put your questions into the Q&A anytime during the program, and we'll be addressing them afterwards. Thanks so much, Marcia.
Thank you so much, Cheryl and Jackie, and to the Union League Club of Chicago, as well as to the Caxton Club for inviting me to speak this evening. And thank you to all of you who have showed up to listen and learn more about the Black Metropolis Research Consortium. We don't have the choices that we used to have in terms of our evening entertainment during this pandemic. So I'm very thankful that you have taken time out of your evening to be with us today. So I'm going to share my screen and my presentation. Again, please do put your questions. I love questions, so please do put them in the Q&A throughout the presentation, and we'll make sure to have time to address them. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start the presentation. And if I could, Cheryl, just be able to share the screen, that would be great. I'm excited to share more with you about the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, or BMRC. 2021 does mark our 15th anniversary as we were founded in 2006. So I'm really excited to share more about our mission, our history, our past initiatives, as well as our current programs and initiatives that we are engaging in to really shine a light on Black historical collections in Chicago. So very excited to share more with you. Great.
There we go.
Wonderful. So again, I'm Marcia Walker-McWilliams, Executive Director of the BMRC. I've been with the BMRC since 2019, but I'm very familiar with the organization as I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago when it was founded. For those who are less familiar with us, the mission of the BMRC is to really connect all who seek to document, share, understand, and preserve Black experiences. And we really seek to help a number of different populations through our programs. We can aid researchers in locating Black historical collections in Chicago. We can also advise potential donors of Black historical collections on helpful resources and, should they choose, how to find a repository for their collections. And we can aid institutions, including our members, in their efforts to preserve and share Black historical collections that they steward. The BMRC was founded in 2006, and our founding vision statement states that the BMRC was to be a Chicago partnership for scholarship and learning. The image that you see is Danielle Allen, and she was the founder of the BMRC. Danielle Allen at the time in 2006 was a professor at the University of Chicago and an eventual dean in the Humanities Division. She and other scholars at the university who were engaging in African American research often had some difficulties finding and locating Black historical collections in the city of Chicago that they could utilize for their research, their teaching, and their other scholarly endeavors. So Allen reached out to local librarians and archivists from different institutions across the city to really start to have conversations about how to address this problem. How could scholars get access to these Black historical collections? And how could they help facilitate or provide pathways for archival institutions to be able to provide resources to scholars as well? The result of these conversations, which existed from 2006 to 2007 and resulted in a number of different programmatic initiatives, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, was the BMRC. BMRC was founded as a membership organization, and we are governed by a board of directors from our member institutions. The University of Chicago has served as our host site since 2006, and myself as executive director and other staff oversee the day-to-day operations of the consortium and carry out the strategic plan, which is directed by our board of directors. So what exactly do we mean when we say BMRC membership? All members of the BMRC, our membership institutions, have two characteristics. The first is that they have collections that are freely accessible to the public, and that essentially means that those collections are accessible to researchers from all walks of life, from your traditional academic scholars to the general public, to high school students, engaging in history projects, and also that these collections are not hidden behind a paywall. They are essentially free to any and everyone. And the second characteristic is that within those collections, there are materials relevant to Black experiences. Most of those materials focus on Chicagoland, but we have a number of members who have materials that are relevant to the larger African diaspora. To date, our membership includes universities, libraries, museums, community-based and arts organizations, as well as other archival repositories. And I'll show you some of the logos of some of our member institutions. You'll see near the top of the screen the many different universities who are a part of the BMRC and our member institutions. You'll see towards the middle and latter portion of the screen some of our more public-facing museums, libraries, arts, and government archives that are also a part of the BMRC. And one of the things I really, really enjoy about our member institutions is how diverse they are in terms of the publics and the communities that they serve, but also in terms of their strengths. right? We have institutions like many of our universities who are very strong in terms of their instruction and their ability to really sort of open up and unveil the treasures within these Black historical collections to students, faculty, and others within those academic communities. At the same time, we have some of our more public-facing organizations like Chicago History Museum, Chicago Public Library, the Newberry, and others who are really strong in terms of their public programming and their ability to draw in the general public to learn more about Black historical collections. There's also an amount of diversity in terms of which of these institutions are 100% of their collections are relevant to Black historical experiences. Thinking about Shorefront Legacy Center, which operates in Evanston in the North Shore, documenting the experiences of African Americans in those communities that date back over 100 years. Or we can think about the Vivian G. Harce Research Collection, which is a part of the Chicago Public Library. It has the largest African American manuscript collection in the Midwest. So there's really a lot of diversity within our member institutions and strengths that really help provide for some dynamic conversations about the documentation, preservation, use, and care of Black historical collections. I'll take a few minutes to talk about some of our past initiatives, which you may or may not be aware of. So out of those initial conversations that Danielle Allen and other scholars had with librarians and archivists was a sense of really trying to understand just what is the landscape of Black historical collections in the city. So from 2009 to 2011, with funding from the Mellon Foundation, the BMRC engaged in a survey initiative where over 40 institutions across Chicagoland were surveyed with the following goals. One, to understand what is actually archived in institutions across Chicago. Where do Black historical collections actually exist? If there is some record of them, are those collections actually accessible to the public? Meaning, can researchers, general public, folks with interest in them, actually go in and view those collections? There was also the question of what is not represented. In terms of Black Chicago history, is there an overrepresentation in politics, but perhaps less so when it comes to the experiences of LGBTQIA plus individuals? Is there an underrepresentation in terms of materials that document the Black West Side as opposed to the Black South Side? So there was also an interest in understanding just what types of historical collections were in existence. And then the other two goals of the survey initiative were really to provide a better description of existing collections to scholars and researchers to actually know what was available. And along those same lines, to provide a searchable database on the BMRC's website that would allow folks to go in and essentially see what was the state of these Black historical collections. On the heels of this survey initiative came the Color Curtain Processing Project. And really the determination that in looking at those over 40 institutions and the many, many collections that were uncovered, were there specific collections that were incredibly historically significant to the history of Black Chicagoans? And the answer was yes, of course. So from 2011 to 2013, the BMRC embarked on the Color Curtain Processing Project, with funding from the Mellon Foundation, as well as CLEAR, the Council on Library and Information Resources. Staff of the BMRC processed over 10,000 linear feet, which amounted to over 135 archival collections, which were previously not available to the public, then made available in an easier format with collection finding aids and inventories that also went into the BMRC database. And I've listed some of the notable collections that were processed as part of the Color Curtain Processing Project. And I'll just say a little bit about each of these. So for example, the Theodore Charles Stone papers at Columbia College Chicago and their Center for Black Music Research Collection documented the efforts of Theodore Charles Stone, who's an African-American baritone singer and one of the foremost Black musicians in the mid to late 20th century. Because Black musicians often found a difficult time being able to really perform across Chicago due to segregation, there was a need for collective organizations and efforts among Black Chicago musicians to provide a space for their performance and their affirmation. And Stone was a heavy proponent of that. There are also the records of Reverend J.H. Jackson. His collection is at the Chicago History Museum, a somewhat controversial religious leader, but certainly one who dedicated efforts to improving the lives of Black Chicagoans. Also, the Chicago Department of Urban Renewal records at the Chicago Public Library, its downtown special collections, really documented the efforts of urban renewal throughout Chicago, in which high density, blighted, or areas that were designated as slums were essentially cleared, and new housing was put in its place, often displacing African Americans. The Jackie Orms papers documenting the efforts of a pioneering Black female cartoonist are at the DuSable. The Community Hospital Evanston collection documenting some of the early efforts of African Americans to provide quality, consistent healthcare to Black people, which they could not get in Chicago or in Evanston outside of emergency care, as well as the Shorebank Corporation records, which are at the University of Illinois, Chicago, documenting the efforts of a community development bank to provide loans and other financial resources in low-income and minority communities across the city of Chicago and later in other urban areas. So really the goal here was to not just sort of understand where Black historical collections were, but to do much more to provide access to them. And I'll talk a little bit about my own personal story, some of which you heard in the bio that Cheryl read. The efforts of the BMRC and similar projects like Mapping the Stacks were so crucial to my own development as a scholar of Black history and culture, and certainly as a scholar interested in Black history and culture in Chicago. When I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago, I was very much interested in writing my dissertation about the influence and the importance of Black women in the United States labor movement. This was a sort of undertold story, a narrative that did not get much attention. Typically, labor history tended to be overwhelmingly focused on the contributions of white men, less so towards women, and certainly even less so towards Black women or women of color. So I was really interested in writing about the ways in which Black women had navigated the labor movement and utilized that movement to improve their communities and labor as a whole. And I was interested in writing about Addie Wyatt, who was a Chicago-based activist and one of the highest ranking Black women in American labor history. Yet I had a very difficult time finding primary sources and finding an archival collection that I could use to really write my dissertation. But it was the efforts of folks like Danielle Allen, of Jackie Goldsby, of archivists like Michael Flug, Beverly Cook, and others who came together at this important, crucial juncture to really provide access to these collections. And it was in working with Mapping the Stacks, which was closely related to the BMRC, that I was able to find out that Addie Wyatt did in fact have a collection of papers. She had in fact just donated those papers in 2007 to the Chicago Public Library's Vivian G. Hart Research Collection. And my part in Mapping the Stacks, in addition to processing other collections, I was actually able to process her papers. So really, had these conversations and these initiatives not taken place, I don't know where I would have been as a scholar interested in producing these new narratives. The result of this was the publication of the first biography on Addie Wyatt by the University of Illinois Press in 2016. And so essentially people invested in preserving Black history saved me. My scholarly career and contributions are deeply indebted to the efforts of the BMRC, Mapping the Stacks, and Black archivists and librarians in Chicago. And really, my ability to be with you today, to be speaking on behalf of the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, could not have happened without these early initiatives. And the efforts of the BMRC to really provide an avenue for scholars to produce new narratives is directly related to our summer short-term fellowship program. In addition to helping to document and preserve Black historical collections, we also want to make sure that they're used, that they are activated by the general public and by researchers. In 2009, the BMRC founded its Summer Short-Term Fellowship Program, which provides an opportunity for scholars, creatives, writers, and many others to apply for our international fellowship competition. If awarded, fellows come to Chicago in the summer for 1 month to conduct research in BMRC member institutions using the survey initiative in Black historical collections. Since 2009, we have awarded over 107 fellowships, and they have been utilized by junior and senior scholars and many others. The image over on the right documents the efforts of my predecessor, Andrea Jackson Gavin, to bring together our BMRC fellows in a summer short-term fellowship reunion nationally that was held in 2018. And to give you a sense of the kinds of works that our fellows have produced, um, here are 8 books just alone from 2019 and 2020 that have been published by BMRC fellows. And I believe a couple of these books, the one by Robert Weems on Anthony Overton, The Merchant Prince of Black Chicago, as well as Simon Balto's Occupied Territory, are nominees for the Outstanding Book Award on the history of Chicago. So all of the books nominated are great, but we're certainly rooting for some of our BMRC fellows. And you can see the wide range of topics related to Black Chicago that are really documented here. Everything from the Black press to the Black arts movement, to restaurants, to religion, to economics. Our fellows really do use these Black historical collections to produce a broad array of new narratives. In addition to those 8 books, our fellows have published at least 22 books on topics related to Black Chicago, which we're really, really very excited about. And not just books, but also dissertations, documentaries, photo exhibitions, and musical performances have been created and produced by our fellows. The image on the right is the album cover of Marcus Shelby, who was an early BMRC fellow. He is a bassist, and he utilized his fellowship to conduct research in archives looking at representations of the civil rights movement in Chicago and beyond, and particularly the relationship between civil rights movement and music. And what he did was he took his research and then developed a whole series of musical songs and productions based off of that. So there really is a diversity in terms of the kinds of outcomes that you see from our fellows. And we're excited to continue this project. There are 2 things I do want to mention regarding our fellowship program. We do have a current cohort of 2020 to 2021 BMRC fellows. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, they've not been able to come to Chicago to conduct their research, but we are hopeful, so hopeful that they will be able to do so soon and that we can share their presentations and their research outcomes with you as well. The second thing I want to mention is that as a result of the many avenues and new narratives of knowledge that have come out of the fellowship, the BMRC is embarking on its first publication, Revisiting the Black Metropolis, New Histories of Black Chicago, that will feature the works of about 10 of our BMRC fellows in an edited volume. That volume is going to be published by the University of Illinois Press, and we are excited that it will be coming to you hopefully within the next year or 2. Our other major flagship program is the Archie Motley Archival Internship Program, named after Archie Motley, who was a longtime archivist at the Chicago History Museum. One of the things that we know is that the field and the profession of librarianship, as well as archives, tends to be overwhelmingly white, and there is not a lot of diversity within that field. And so in addition to thinking about the documenting, the preserving, and the use, we also think about the care and the stewardship of these collections and wanting to provide opportunities to increase the pipeline and increase awareness of archival profession for underrepresented students. We also want to provide processing help and help documenting, preserving, and sharing these Black historical collections for our member institutions. So since 2016, we have awarded 11 internships to underrepresented students, undergraduates, as well as those in library school to provide hands-on paid internship experience at our member institutions working with Black historical collections. Again, we've had to sort of use that favorite word pivot as part of the pandemic. And so we successfully last summer had our first remote virtual internship, and we'll be continuing that process this summer as well. Aside from our past initiatives and programs, we do believe in partnership and collaboration. I believe Cheryl said that, things are easier together, and working together, you're able to get more done. And we see partnership and collaboration as a key part of our work. So we have regularly partnered with Chicago Collections Consortium on programming the past couple of years, and just being in conversation, right? It's conversation partners about the landscape of collections that shed light on Chicago's history. We have also partnered with the History Makers on a program really tied towards legacy management and providing resources and tools for potential donors of Black historical collections. And we've also partnered with the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture on a community curation program in Chicago in the fall, September of 2019, where many Black Chicagoans from across the city, both the South and West Side, were able to learn more about legacy management, preserving their history, and getting some of their family mementos and really key photographs, recipes, documents, digitized and preserved for future use. I'll take a couple of minutes just to talk about some of our current initiatives before wrapping up. So currently we are hard at work on a grant called Documenting Black Chicago through Technology, Sustainability, and Outreach. This grant is funded by the Mellon Foundation, and it's really geared towards two key projects. The first is sort of updating that collections database that I spoke about with the survey initiative and the color curtain processing project, and expanding our digital presence and making sure that we are doing our best to continue to increase access to Black historical collections in Chicago. So there's a major update of that process and that database happening now, and we're hoping to really enhance the ways in which people think about describing African American collections and accessing those collections from a researcher or user perspective. The other portion of this grant is geared towards helping our member institutions with community engagement and collection diversification, as well as helping the public around legacy management and resources. So we're having a series of public programming as well as programs for our member institutions and workshops around community engagement and collection diversification. And the document on the right just shows some of our past efforts and an ongoing series as a part of this grant work. There are also some resources that I hope you will check out on our website, which will be listed on the last slide. But as a part of this grant work as well, we are really concerned with legacy management and really ensuring that certainly all Chicagoans, but especially Black Chicagoans, have access to the tools and the education to preserve their individual, their family, their community, and their organizational histories. And so a part of this grant has provided funding for us to provide this legacy management resource portal, which essentially exists on our website as well as in a pamphlet form, really providing key information. What are archives? What's some of the language that you hear? How do we sort of decrease the divide between the kinds of archival knowledge that are held within institutions and the ways in which the public thinks about archives and collections and memory work? In addition, we are also currently at work on a community needs and assets assessment survey, which is available through our website as well, where we're really seeking to learn more information from African American communities across Chicago about what they would like to see from us in terms of workshops and programming that we're going to be able to provide under this grant. So if you know or have connections to African Americans in the city of Chicago, please do encourage them to take our survey. It will definitely go a long way towards helping us learn more about the needs, but also the assets that exist within Black Chicago communities. A couple of other resources that we have on our website. Over the summer, certainly in the wake of the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and so many others, there were a number of statements coming out from organizations kind of um, really discussing the ways in which systemic racism and racial inequality have impacted all aspects of our society. And we at the BMRC really wanted to step into that space, but in a way that was authentic to the work that we do. And so through this resource, Protests in the Archives, we really wanted to provide a way and a space to educate people about the history of protests in this country, especially as it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement and efforts to preserve Black historical collections. And so we created this Protest in the Archives resource, which essentially provides tons of articles, videos, and other activities geared at helping people really understand what is the nature of archiving protest. How is that done? Why is that done? What are the ethics involved in capturing and documenting protests? And what's the conversation that's been happening in libraries, museums, and archives about the ways to do this that both affirms Black life, but also um, recognizes things like right to privacy as well. And so this is a kind of crowdsourced resource, and we invite people to send us um, any articles, videos, or relevant materials that we can add. And this list has been growing and growing and growing. We're really excited about it. And there are ways that you can learn more about us and what it is that we do as an organization. So certainly you can visit our website, which is bmrc.lib.uchicago.edu. There you can find the link to our community needs and assets assessment survey. You can also find the Protests in the Archives. You can learn more about our 2020 to 2021 cohort of fellows, and really anything you want to learn about us. A lot of that is on our website. We're also excited again that this is our 15th anniversary. And in honor of that, I've curated a 15th anniversary exhibit. There were high hopes in the beginning that we would be able to have people to physically visit an exhibit, but of course with the pandemic, that was not possible. But there is a web exhibit that is open to the general public. And we're very thankful to the folks at the Hannah Holborn Great Special Collections Research Center at the University of Chicago for hosting this exhibit and really helping with the design of this web exhibit. You can also access this via our website as well. And we have a monthly e-newsletter and a biannual print newsletter, the BMRC News. You can sign up to receive this newsletter as well. We promise we won't inundate you with lots of things. You'll get a monthly e-newsletter that basically discusses some of the efforts and programs of the consortium, but also will link you to key events from our member institutions and their efforts to highlight Black historical collections. And will also twice a year receive our print or PDF newsletter, the BMRC News, which takes a deeper look at some of the questions and developments within the sort of Black Chicago archival world. And finally, before we open it up to the Q&A, I do want to just give a really appreciative shout out to our supporters. We receive a lot of support to do all of the work that I've talked about from our host institution, the University of Chicago. We are a membership institution, so all of our members pay a fee or a dues to be a part of the BMRC, and so we are thankful very much so to our members. We have also had great support from foundations. The Mellon Foundation, the Gaylord and Dorothy Donnelly Foundation, as well as the Terra Foundation for American Art have supported our efforts. And we also receive donations from individuals who want to give us gifts, big and small, to help support all of our efforts that go towards our Archie Motley Archival Internship, our fellowship program, and all of our efforts. Individuals can certainly help us and support us through a link available on our website. So I'd really, really love, I see there's some questions in Q&A, which I'm excited to get to, but also wanted to provide some ways that you can, again, continue to connect with us. So there is our website. You can also email us, bmrc@uchicago.edu. If you have ideas about how we can partner with you If you have research questions about Black Chicago history, definitely email us. If you have news that you would like us to share with our members in our network, please do email us. And you can also connect with us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And we just unveiled within the past year our YouTube channel, which includes recordings of some of our programs. So thank you so much for listening to what I know was a lot of information, but I'm excited to get into a more interactive part of the program.
Thanks so much, Marcia. So speaking of recordings, this presentation will be recorded and going out to everybody who reserved for it, but there also will be a link to the recording that we can share with you if you would like that. But this has been great. Let's dive into the questions. Stuart Miller has a question. Are there other cities with similar initiatives for identifying Black-related archives?
Thank you, Stuart, for that question. And I am not sure. I have not seen anything similar to the Black Metropolis Research Consortium. And actually, in the past, some of my predecessors have received inquiries from other major urban centers wanting to start something like the BMRC for their museums, archives, libraries, and universities. So there may be a pathway and an avenue eventually for the BMRC to engage in that work of helping to, really provide resources and ideas and perspectives about how to do this as a consortium. So thank you very much for that question.
Stephen Reese says, wonderful presentation. How far back in time do your archives cover?
So our archives are actually held at our member institutions. We will often get folks who will write to us and say, can we come visit the BMRC archives? And if they would like to see my desk, which is messy the last time I left it back last March, that is possible. But really the archival collections I'm speaking to reside within our member institutions. And there is a breadth in terms of the time period. Some of those collections do date back to the 19th century, certainly looking at the period of enslavement, the Civil War, abolitionist efforts, you will find those. Specifically within Chicago or relevant to Black Chicago history, there are also collections that refer to the sort of old settlers that you will see those as well. And then there are some collections that document the efforts of Jean-Baptiste Bointe-Dussart, the founder of the city of Chicago, but not to my knowledge, any sort of direct archival sort of records or manuscripts or anything like that. But thank you for your question.
Robert Caro asks, besides the Defender, were there other Black newspapers in Chicago or suburbs? And if so, have their files been preserved?
Yes, so there were actually a number of Black historical newspapers. There was the Bee, I think there was the Daily World. There were a number of them, and there were also some Black publications within the suburbs. As far as the North Shore, you would want to look at the collections of Shorefront, Legacy Center. As far as newspaper collections, they're kind of scattered sort of throughout different collections as people would have collected those newspapers. So you can see those perhaps by looking within our searchable database for sure. You can look up Chicago Defender, you can look up Chicago Bee, and you will probably not see a sort of historical run of those archives, but you might see particular issues that individuals kept or held with their papers. And then you can also look at things like some of the digital resources and collections available through ProQuest or other series to see what runs they have of those publications. Thank you.
Cheryl and Don ask, what are some of the high points of collections you've seen, things that surprised or delighted you to find?
Oh, wow. So I spent about 3 years working at the Vivian G. Harce Research Collection of the Chicago Public Library. In fact, working on the papers of Robert Abbott and John Singstack, who the founding family of the Chicago Defender, So really great things there. Worked on the papers of Horace Cayton, who was one of the authors of the Black Metropolis, which is where we take our name from, that seminal study of Black life in the city of Chicago. Um, and Horace Cayton, his mother, Susie Revel Cayton, was the daughter of the first African-American senator. So really kind of just seeing the lineage of Black Chicagoans has been great. I mean, there are so many wonderful collections, just super things I've seen, from artistic works to handwritten manuscripts and letters. There's so much, looking at some of the correspondence within the Addie Wyatt papers, seeing the letter that Eleanor Roosevelt wrote to her to get her to be on President Kennedy's Commission on the Status of Women was awesome, right? In the 1960s. And I would love, love, love to spend most of my days in the archives looking at these collections, but I can't. I have to spend it outside, kind of promoting them and helping our member institutions promote these collections. But there's some wonderful, wonderful treasures in these collections. And we only hope that people will, when they're able to access them and use them.
Erica Dowell asks, I'd love to hear more about your legacy management work. Raising awareness of the important materials in private hands is so important.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, far too often there's a common story in archives where archivists are called in at the moment when someone has been evicted or someone has passed on, and now their papers, their legacy, their life collections is, in critical condition. I've heard of stories of archivists literally going into dumpsters trying to recover, important materials. And so we don't want it to get to that point. We want to equip donors with the education that they have about archives and repositories, and to be able to make the decision. If they are in a position to steward collections themselves, how can they do that, knowing the best practices for preserving materials and keeping them safe from elements like weather, water, and not having them in your deep, damp, dark basement or having them in your hot attic, things like that. But then also, if they're not interested in stewarding a collection, say, a historical figure has passed on and their children aren't necessarily willing to keep those things, how do they make the best decisions as far as approaching repositories? What's the best place and the best home for their materials, where their materials will get the care that they need? So we do a lot of that legacy management work where we can provide those resources for people who write into us. We can help them think about what their goals are for their collections. If they are looking for a repository, we can provide for them some neutral guidance and information about the repositories that exist within Chicago. But we're also looking to do more hands-on workshops. And that's why that survey we have up on our website now is really important, because it's going to help inform what those workshops look like. So if we need to do a workshop on preserving photographs or family histories and papers, we're going to have that. If we get a lot of organizations that reach out to us wanting to know about best practices for collecting materials and describing materials and managing those, that's going to dictate the kind of workshops that we have. So for us, legacy management is really about providing those resources and that education and just increasing awareness that we're here to help.
Chelsea Kaufman asks, have you seen an increase in scholars utilizing the BMRC's resources in the wake of the George Floyd protests?
So we have had inquiries come into the BMRC of more folks specifically looking for information about Black protest history in Chicago, writing into us of, hey, we know these things happened with the Chicago Freedom School, or we're looking for more information about the education boycotts in the 60s, or we're looking for more information about, Black Panthers in Chicago. So we have seen some of those requests come in, helping scholars or documentarians and filmmakers to sort of make the arc, thinking about what has happened in the past and how that connects to the current struggle for Black lives. So we have seen some of that. But again, we've had some of our fellows who have been looking at that work since 2009, really wanting to sort of document and highlight the experiences of protest in Chicago.
Sandra Blakemore says, thank you. I've learned so much good information tonight. Are these efforts to be able to get some of the research to even younger kids? Are there any efforts to partner with CPS or City of Chicago libraries?
So we do partner with the City of Chicago Library. They are one of our members. We have partnered last year. We partnered with the Chicago Metro Education History Fair for all of the teachers in the sort of teacher professional development to provide a presentation about Black historical collections in Chicago and the resources of the BMRC. But that's certainly an effort where we want to do more. Many of our programs have impacted graduate students and faculty and sort of academic scholars, but we are definitely wanting to do more with undergraduate students as well as high school students and even middle school students. So branching out into that area is a part of our efforts. Certainly as we look to sort of increase and beef up our digital presence, we want to be doing some of that outreach as well. Thinking about Black history curriculum in Chicago and in Illinois is certainly an area where we want to be involved and hope to do so.
Lisa Olson says, thank you, Marcia. I wonder if you can talk about some collections in Chicago that you'd like to see preserved. Are there any collections in jeopardy? Collections that you'd like to see come to light?
Sure. So, I think it was pretty big news that the Johnson Publishing collection kind of got scattered, all over. And so, information about Ebony and Jet and some of the really great things in their archives are being preserved, but outside of the city of Chicago. And so I think, we want to do more to ensure that those collections that talk about Chicago and provide a deeper history of Chicago reside within the city. There's a lot I would love to see about the West Side of Chicago. That's a frequent area where, folks talk about the underdocumentation of West Side Black history. And so wanting to see those collections come to light. I've also been recently very interested in ensuring that we increase our connections with sort of Black diasporic populations within the city of Chicago. So thinking about collections and the history of Afro-Latinas in the city, thinking about the efforts of immigrants from the African diaspora and the ways in which, folks of Haitian descent or Nigerian descent have really played a role in shaping what it is we talk about when we say Black Chicago history. But there's so much more. I mean, I think there's more we can do to document the efforts of Black women activists in Chicago. Certainly, Chicago has a rich Black labor history, and so I would love to see more of those collections donated. There's just a lot. I mean, there's a lot about Chicago, and Chicago being so central to the formation and the development of African American history and culture within the United States. It's almost as if I was, in a dialogue a couple of days ago where someone was saying, literally, if you're looking at Black history, all roads are going to lead back to Chicago at some point in time. So I would just love to see the range of collections continue to grow. And really just to document more and more about the contributions, but also the struggles and sometimes the dark histories of things that have happened, related to Black communities in Chicago.
So I think you kind of touched on this. Stuart Miller asked, was there an effort to keep the Johnson Publishing archives and photo collection in a Chicago institution? He says, I think they ended up elsewhere. Yes, they did.
Yes, there were efforts. However, finances loomed very large in that negotiation. And so ultimately, financially, interests outside of Chicago were able to essentially sort of get the rights to that collection. There are, I believe, a large part of some of the collection is still held within the Chicagoland area, but the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History, for example, has a large part of the photograph collection of Johnson Publishing. And then there are other collections that are related to that are still in Chicago. So for example, the Rebuild Foundation, which is on the south side of Chicago, they have been able to maintain the book library collection from Johnson Publishing, as well as some of the furniture and the other physical staples. And then there are related collections. So the papers of Lerone Bennett Jr. Are at Chicago State. I don't believe they're yet accessible to the public, but they will be soon. And then there are other collections as well that exist that do shed light on Johnson Publishing.
Alice Schreier asks, is the BMRC continuing the support for processing relevant collections and providing graduate students with experience like you had? Do members hold audio and video? Do members hold audio and video materials? I know there are great home movie collections. And if so, are links to them provided on your website?
Great. So thank you, Alice, and thank you for all the questions. So for the first part, in terms of efforts for graduate students to gain processing experience, so in the past, our Archie Motley internship has provided that opportunity for graduate students, but only within the summer. But we are now hoping, and we have something in the works that we hope will come about that will provide an opportunity for graduate students to get some of that longer term experience working in an archival repository processing collections. So we're hopeful that those sort of applications for funding and those partnerships will come through, which will provide something similar to mapping the stacks for graduate students in our member institutions. There are audiovisual materials at our member institutions. Right now, through our database, they are not necessarily kind of coded or described as such, but that is a part of our update, is to make sure that we have better description for the existing collections within our member institutions. So that's something we do hope to highlight in terms of audiovisual materials.
So the next question is from, hi, Caroline. I'm gonna mangle your name, Caroline Sizzlewitz. And she says, thank you for this wealth of information. Do you track institutions with holdings relevant to BMRC activities, but are located outside of the Chicagoland area be considered for membership?
So we have not, up until this point, really looked at that in terms of institutions that might have Chicago related or Black Chicago related materials outside of the city of Chicago. We are in the process of sort of expanding our membership categories where we would be able to connect with institutions like that. Institutions who may have materials that exist, but they exist outside of Chicagoland, or institutions who simply, as well as individuals who share our mission and believe our mission, want to support it. So we are hard at work on expanding those membership categories, and we hope to be able to unveil that within the next year as well.
So there were a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to pick up on, and I think that'll take us to the end of our time. Do you have many genealogists use your collections?
We have had some genealogists. If any of you are familiar with Tony Burrows, who's an excellent and well-known genealogy of African-American history, he is one of our past fellows who worked on a research project related to genealogy. So we have had some folks use our collections for genealogical purposes, and we actually have a lot of people write into us saying, my uncle or my grandfather was such and such in Chicago in the 40s and 50s. Do you have anything related to him? So we often have to do some digging to see if there are, extant collections that might shed light on that. But certainly thinking about resources for genealogists is a part of the work that we're doing, and thinking about users and researchers for our database and sort of enhancing our digital presence.
And there's one more. Do you have any special collections on architects who are African-American?
We do have some collections, and one of our fellows actually did a project on Black sort of architectural history in the city of Chicago. So we do have some collections. And if you have specific sort of research questions, you can always email us, bmrc@uchicago.edu, and we can provide you with a list of those historical collections in the city that are relevant to your search and the repositories where they exist.
This has been really great, Marcia. Thank you so much. I'm in awe of your work. You're doing a wonderful job, and thank you. Thank you so much for sharing all your information about the BMRC. So with that, please come back to our other programming, and we thank you, Marcia.
Thank you all.
We say good night.